The original recording had poor sound quality, so I have recorded a new audio track for this video. Therefore, during the brief introduction at the beginning and the farewell at the end of this recording, the audio will not be in sync with the video. Hello and welcome. Greetings from Illinois. I will be doing a figurative demonstration today, although because of the limitations on time and on the gigabytes allowed for this recording, I will spend most of my time concentrating on the head and the torso. You're looking at the drawing, and there is my reference. The figure is seated, so I will not get too involved with the arms nor the legs in this particular case, again, because of the limitations on the time. What you're looking at here is a value study. I do this before most of my paintings. So I'm just looking at the large shapes and declaring their values, keeping it simple. If I was just doing a portrait, this would be something more like what I would do. Again, the big shapes considered and their values. My drawing board is at a tilt, an angle, so that the brush strokes of paint, the fluid will run down to the bottom of the paint. I will start at the top of the painting, the top of the head and the hair. And as I was saying, because of the angle, the paint runs down to the bottom of each brush stroke and leaves a bead from which I can draw upon with subsequent brush strokes. So I like to work at an angle. This is the area in which I would begin painting the hair, moving down into the face and down into the torso of the painting. I spend enough time on the drawing to get it to be reasonably accurate, but that accuracy also allows me to be free and loose and interpretive with my brushwork. So knowing that the pencil lines are accurate, I know that even though my brush goes outside of the lines, that I will end up with something that will be reasonably accurate. So I've begun with a quinacridone burnt orange and adding some blue into the mixture, graying it, cooling it as that part of the hair recedes from the head. As you can see, I'm moving right into the face, ignoring the pencil lines. So for this particular reason, I am encouraging the paint to link with one part of the painting into another, disregarding exactly what I'm painting and looking more at being inclusive, sharing color. So the color of the hair is shared with the color of the face. And you'll see me do that as I progress downward. The colors I'm using so far, again, that quinacridone burnt orange, some manganese blue. There was some alizarin crimson in the hair. The shared color is creating a harmonious feeling to the painting right from the start. There will be some times when I will not be speaking, just allowing you to watch and absorb what you see. You notice I am leaving some areas white, so the eyelids would be an example of that. So I'm considering the light that is striking the figure. I like to put down a brush stroke of paint, and often I will go back to the water, take some of the paint and water out of the brush, come back to the brush stroke and feather it out. You will also see me painting into areas that are drying, some areas more wet than others. I like to do that because it encourages a variety of edges And that variety is encouraging interest, providing more interest in the painting. So I am a lover of edges and the various kinds of edges that can be had in a painting. Already we can see hard edges on the hair right above my brush right there. We can see the softness of the hair where it bleeds out into the background. Here I'm bringing in some darks. It's important to bring in darks early on in the painting process so that I can make more accurate judgments on the other values, without which you're never sure if your other values are dark enough or too light. So the brush work that has brought in those darks is very effective and useful in that regard. I'm using a number 10 round brush here. You will see me go to a smaller brush when it's needed. I'm also using some pure pigment in some areas where I want to punctuate the statement. There's a little of that crimson again to help balance it out with the crimson that was in the hair. Now here's a place where I think the big brush was a little bit too big for what I was trying to say. So I think you're going to see me come back with a smaller brush. And there it is, realizing that I probably was a little too overzealous with the big brush in that area. One thing that I am not afraid of when I paint, and that is to make mistakes. First of all, I know that most of the things that are done that may be an error can be rectified, can be taken care of and fixed. Many things that look like they're wrong initially end up being not nearly as visible as the painting progresses because of all the other things that have come about in the painting. There's that rich color under the chin and on the beard. Again, punctuating, not being afraid to be bold in my decisions and my application. In a very short time, look how this head has come to life. There's the small brush again. Another thing you'll notice is my attention to moving from warm to cool, which again, for the sake of interest, providing interest in the painting with the idea in mind that you do have an audience and you would like your audience to be enthusiastic about what they're looking at, finding interest. And the variety is not only a way in which to capture that interest, but as importantly, or perhaps maybe even more importantly, to sustain that interest. You're seeing the introduction of more darks. Much more will come. Obviously, the eyes are not painted yet. If I were not under the restrictions of time and I was intending to paint the whole figure as it was presented, I wouldn't be spending this much time on the face. I would have started just as you saw, moved down from the hair into the face with that first wash, but I wouldn't have been working here with the beard and the mustache and the mouth. I would have already moved down through the neck and probably would have already been into the torso of the figure. The idea being that I want to be as inclusive as possible, especially in the beginning. Here I am splattering some paint, looking for any way I can to activate the wash. Yeah, so I would have progressed down through the torso of the figure, right on down into the arms and into the legs, making some initial statement about the whole, as opposed to being uh, concentrating my time in one place. But because I am under those time constraints, and I know that I would never have been able to finish all of that, I'm trying to bring what I can to some state of finish for you. So a lot of what I'm doing now would have been done after I would have progressed through the whole figure, making my initial statement about the big shapes. I would have then come back to the face and start to do what I am doing now. So here's some punctuation of not only value, dark eyebrows, but the warm temperature in the eye socket. These colors are not found on the figure, certainly not found in a reference photograph. Photographs are amazingly important to me as a painter, but they also make me shiver when it comes to thinking how poorly they provide information for me. So it is mostly about the initial excitement I feel about the pose and maybe the light, but it's in the painting that I hope to bring life to this form. On this other eye, the second eye I painted here brings up the thought that I don't like my eyes to look the same. So there's that warm color in the eye socket on the eye of the left. And it might be hard to see, but there is a blue, a manganese blue in that eye socket to the right. So the color difference is evident. The punctuation of the dark here and the eye lid around that light of the eyelid is really bringing to life that the light that is on the curvature of the eyelid. This is a part of the painting where I think I've got paint on the side of my palm, which is how those spots have come about to the right of the head. But I rather pleased with them. They're part of the activity of my painting process. And as you can see by now, I'm very direct, and I like that spontaneity, that freshness that can come about from the direct, confident brushstrokes. A note here, that eye to the right that has the dark brow and then connects to the darkness of the socket, that shape is okay. I don't know what came over me, but I end up going back there and taking that little notch out of that shape away, which bothered me. Unfortunately, you will not be able to see the final product where I would correct things like that and improve it. It should have been just left alone as the shape that it is. Bringing in some more darks here, some cool darks. So we're already seeing some of the warm, cool juxtapositions that are being provided in the painting. And I think that it's sparked some life. Splattering a little bit more there. You can't see those splatters, but they're just to the left of the hair there. I really embrace watercolor in all its forms. And when you think about putting paint together with water, well, the water wants to do things. You don't think of it being still. It moves, it strips, it splatters, it runs. And I embrace all of those aspects of watercolor in my paintings. And I find that they lend a certain life, a certain spirit to the work. and it obviously is evidence of the medium. Of course, the medium can be used in an innumerable amount of ways. So my way of painting is just one. What you see now is me attending to some large business that, as I mentioned before, I would have done much sooner had I had more time and to be able to paint the whole figure for you to some state of completion. But knowing that that couldn't happen, I got the head to a reasonable state of finish, and now I'm progressing down. This is a number 10 brush. I may have mentioned that before. At this point, I wish I had a larger brush in my hand. So I'm making sure that I'm drawing from a large pool of paint in my palette, and I'm making sure my brushwork is large, not too nitpicky. I'm rather pleased with the look that is happening there. You're seeing a large wash, and it's opposite a smaller refinement that is found in the head. So there's some nice contrast there. And paintings are all about contrasts of all the different elements. And so here we're talking about contrast and texture. As I was painting this, I was cognizant of that top part of the head where the paint is diffused into the background. And I thought of defining that more, but decided not to. I like that exchange that goes on up there. Here you're seeing me further the dimensional quality of the figure by darkening some of the shadow area. The form of the figure, as in the form of anything, comes into fruition by the value structure. And here it's a matter of considering shadow shapes and the light shape. So I'm bringing some richer, darker value in, letting it mingle on the paper, coercing it with my brush to do certain things, always with this communing of I have this conversation, you might say, with the painting. I let it talk to me, if you will, and I respond by leaving something alone or manipulating it or whatever it may be. Too often we see the young painter locked into the photograph, missing all the opportunities of creative expression. So much of what you see here, especially with color, is creative. It's an inventive use of color, bringing this particular subject a new life, if you will, away from the photograph. Now you're seeing this wash that I just recently put in the cheeks and how it is juxtaposed to that cooler wash on the side of the nose. And so you're seeing that warm, cool exchange there, which is pleasing to the eye. One thing that I try to resist in my painting is the temptation to get everything just right. I see this a lot with my students. They're overworking their attempt to get everything just right, and often they do, and at that point in time it's just wrong because it's been overworked. I often will say how I would prefer to fail on the side of fresh paint So in other words, if the painting is going to fail, I don't want it to be said that the paint quality has suffered. I'm looking for the clean, fresh, luminous quality that watercolor offers and that no other medium does. Another reason why watercolor is so special. So as the painting develops, a lot of the little things that might not be perfect actually become part of the expression that I find pleasurable, the inaccurate. Which I think lends to a sense of that painterly quality. Here I'm exaggerating, as I did in the eye socket of the left eye, exaggerating the warm, reflective quality on the underside of the nose. In truth, I don't remember what I was saying here. I think I was talking about that top of the head and the hair and considering defining it, but resisting that temptation in favor of the variety of the edge, all of which is lending that quality that I like so much. Now I'm commenting on how I've put those spots on the paper. My palm is resting in areas where the paint is damp, hasn't dried yet, and then I go and rest my palm on that paper over to the right and transfer the paint. Interesting technique, not done on purpose. Another note I will say is the pencil lines. I like the pencil lines. I will always look at them when a painting is finished, and if there are some that I find to be annoying, I will eliminate them. But for the most part, I'll leave them. I find that pleases me as part of a watercolor. One way in which I considered it is I imagined having a painting of an American master in my hand, let's say John Sargent, holding it in my hands and seeing the pencil lines. It's as if you're seeing into the mind of the artist before the artist ever picked up the brush. Now, as I developed the head a little more, I recognized that the t-shirt was looking a little plain, a little flat, and needs a little bit more attention. So here's where I think I made my mistake. I don't know what made me do that. So you can bet on the final that you will not see. I will fix that. I will eliminate, I will lift that out and get a more interesting shape there. One of the things that happens in my own work, because I am a very direct painter, is that sometimes things don't go quite as I had hoped. I'm not painting from the hip, but I am painting very decisively and quickly. I'm remembering thinking of John Sargent again. He referred to a watercolor painting as making the most out of an emergency, and that really resonated with me because of the direct fashion in which I paint. And the paint is wet and drying, and I need to make decisions, and I want to make them in a very bold and direct manner. And I don't feel sometimes that I have the luxury of time to sit back and sip on a cup of coffee while I make my decisions. And therefore, sometimes my decisions aren't as accurate as I'd like them to be. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm not afraid to do that because I know that I can make corrections. Now you're seeing me bring some of the um, interest into the shirt that I referred to before, that I thought the shirt was a little plain and flat. So I'm going to introduce some folds. This is a part of the painting that needs to be thoughtful. Not that any other part isn't, but sometimes we just start enjoying the process so much that we just start painting everything we see, every fold that's on the shirt. And I didn't want to do that. So I'm trying to be selective as to what folds, what brush strokes would be purposeful without filling up the whole area with just a lot of brush strokes. So I'm thinking of certain folds. I'm also considering that when I do these kinds of things on the figure, that the strokes follow the form. That's important too. Now that arm there is receding away from the figure. I think it's important to note that the brush strokes are not over manipulated. I'm not painting over and over again. For the most part, I put the paint down, and within reason, I leave it alone. I don't want to steal that quality that I referred to earlier, that rich and luminous quality that watercolor can provide. So there you're seeing me put a brush stroke down, go back to the water, reduce maybe the paint. Maybe I change a little bit of the color, get a little more paint in my brush, take a little bit of that paint out of the brush by going to the water, blotting my brush. Maybe I come back and soften the edge. So that was a brush that had mostly water in it, as this one does, softening the edge, pulling it right across. Those kinds of brushwork encourage that mingling of the paint from one area to another. There's some hair behind him, so I'm putting a little dark in here. If this were a live demonstration, I would have told you on the front end that I encourage all kinds of questions. And so it's a little odd to be talking about my painting and not hearing anybody asking me questions. Sometimes I'll bring the brush to the paper and then I back away There may be some hesitancy. There's nothing wrong with being unsure. The problem is when you're unsure and you have the brush on the paper and you keep moving it around until you get sure. That's a problem. I think at this point, I was pleased with the brushwork on the shirt and did not want to go any further. There's some nice curvilinear brushstrokes there that are very decisive, that are a nice contrast. Their linear quality is a nice contrast to the large brushwork done earlier. And again, as I said before, painting is a compilation of contrasts. I started painting here and realized that I was out of the field of view, so there was really no sense to go any further. But what is below that are the arms, and then the one hand is seen, and then the legs and a foot, but it just wasn't enough. The camera couldn't take all that in unless I were to have backed away so much that it would have been just too small. I'm at a point here where I'd say finished almost. So what I typically do in the studio is I put a mat around my painting, as you're seeing me do here, and that covers up the extraneous distractions that are immediately off the paper's edge. And it helps me make decisions at the end point of the painting, decisions that can be more accurate. So I like to put that mat on there. It's a dirty old mat, obviously. So I'm not afraid with that mat on there to go back into the painting. And if I feel there are things that I can still do, and that's where paint has splattered on the mat from a period of time of using that mat for that purpose. I'll bring it a little closer here so that you can see the colors. There's a life to this that just will not be found in the photograph. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this demonstration. And if you have any questions, well, I'm sorry, I can't answer them. But I do hope you found some pleasure and some inspiration. And I thank the Watercolor Society of North Carolina for allowing me to present this. It's been a pleasure and an honor. So I wish you a happy journey in your paintings.